Hello and welcome to Make It Work, the bi-weekly podcast where we uncover inspiring stories of modern working mamas in Asia who have redefined their career paths whilst putting family first. I'm Sarah Wong, and today I speak with my friend and INSEAD MBA classmate Noriko Shindo from Japan. Noriko shares a story from being an Amazon employee to two-time entrepreneur since having kids and tells us why the time during pregnancy and maternity leave could be the best time to start a business or project of your own. Come and listen to how she navigated the transition corporate into startup and how she also teaches her vegan and minimalist lifestyle values to her two young kids. Hi Noriko. Good to have you here.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks for having me.
Tell us about yourself and your story under 2 minutes.
I'm Noriko Shindo. I'm biologically Japanese, born in Japan, raised in New York, London, and Tokyo. I started my career in finance and then stopped that to get my MBA at INSEAD, where I met Sarah. I came back to Japan, joined Amazon Japan as a strategic consultant, turned into product manager, turned into business developer. And that's when I stopped to have my first child, during which I started my entrepreneurship journey. My husband, Ofer, is from Israel, and now I have a second child too, plus the dog. We live in a humble apartment in Tokyo. That's me.
Actually, I think many of us would be curious to hear a little bit of your routine in a day. Help us understand how it looks like, how you juggle that with your husband alone in Japan, because you're both foreigners in a way. How do you guys do it?
How do we indeed? So one fun fact, I'm trying to be certified in yoga. So I wake up at 5:30 or 6 alone, and I try to get my yoga done in the morning. And then we all try to get up at 7 a.m. So that's when the day starts. Ofu will cook oatmeal or breakfast for everyone. And then right next to him, I will cook 2 sets of vegan lunches because Japan is very behind on veganism and the school doesn't cater to vegans. We eat breakfast at 7:30, 8ish, and the kids get ready, or we get them ready. And usually Ofer takes them in the morning. So he leaves around 8:30. And for me, every day looks very different at work. Either I sit down at the PC or I get ready to go out. And then during the day work, I usually pick them up 6ish with the dogs, and that's the dog walk done as well. Efficient. And then the kids have a shower with the papa after the day, and then we have dinner together 7ish. The younger one goes to sleep 7:30. Kid number 2 from 8 to 9, and that's kind of it. Ideally, we both want to get more work done from 8 to 10ish. Weekends, the kids are home. I almost wish we have a 3-day weekend for parents, and the kids can get the nursery from Monday to Friday, but the parents can get like Monday off, just away from kids, but away from work as well.
That's a new model. It's like a day off for the parents to recover from the weekend, right? Because that's always the craziest energy sucking thing you can imagine. Weekends with young kids.
Yeah. It's fun, but yeah, you're right. Like by the end of Sunday, I'm like, come on, bring on Monday.
Yeah, Mondays definitely change after having kids. So you kind of look forward to Monday now.
Yeah.
So interesting. And what are you doing right now?
So right now, I'm on my second entrepreneurship journey. The one that I started back in 2020 was on mat leave with my first kid. I recently stepped away from, and as of literally this month, I've onboarded as Chief Product Officer and co-founder for another startup called Dokoni.
Wow. It sounds like a huge journey from our crazy INSEAD days, where I remember you as someone who definitely had your head on your shoulders. I didn't expect you to go rogue so quickly, I guess. Talk about how motherhood kind of changed your idea of work and career.
Yeah, it's funny because in the beginning I thought it didn't change, and then I realized it has changed. So previously I wanted to be in a place that was always exciting and that I grow. I was with amazing people, etc. Kind of things you hear about London, of course, with a nice paycheck and stuff like that. But then I think what happened with motherhood is like more and more, not just in work, but I think more about what kind of planet or earth or society are we leaving for our kids. In 30 odd years, they're going to be me. I'm like, well, I hope the world is not going to be gone, or, all these things. And then just in practical terms of day to day, I surprisingly relish the time. I just want to be with them. So when I think about what I want to do in a career, somehow it's less, let's say, ambitious. I don't know if ambitious is the right word, but it's no longer, let's just do 120% every day and do the best and blah, blah. Sometimes it's like, you know what? My kid is home today because she's sick. I'm going to take the afternoon off because I want to just be with her.
What gave you those kind of thoughts about how you'll be able to put in 120 both at work and in your family life prior to actually having kids? Was it your culture, your family?
Oh, that's a good one. I think personality wise, I've kind of liked to go all out if I do something or put my head to it. And not sure it was influenced so much by family, although I think it does help that I'm Japanese, and maybe it's a similar thing with all Asian cultures, but there is this thing of you have to be good at this one thing. And this one thing occupies your head pretty much all your life. And so you have these famous guys, Jiro's Sushi, right? He spent 10
Yeah.
years washing rice or some crazy thing like that before he was even allowed to make his first sushi. And then now he is looked upon as like the Japanese spirit of someone with skill and professionalism. So that's definitely there and probably ingrained in me as well.
Interesting. And what's that Japanese word that they use to talk about what you just said?
Well, the type of person Jiro is called Shok. And often you only use it for people who have a very certain skill that's acquired over decades and through dedication of day in, day out, early morning to late night.
Talk a little bit about the experience that you had post MBA where you're working in Amazon, and how did you decide, what was it, an epiphany that you had at work when you were doing maternity leave?
That's an interesting one. First of all, pregnancy slows every woman down. You're heavier, so you can't walk as fast. Like, even if you don't want to be slowed down, most women will slow down because of pregnancy. And what I realized is, one, like, I just cannot sit in front of a PC all day, every day anymore. But that was the pregnancy. But then that sort of just carried on. And then even after birth, I'm like, I don't think I want to just do this and just sit in one location and just give it my all into the screen, especially for something that is not mine. Amazon, for example, could survive without me. They've been surviving for a couple of years without me. So small things like that, I think, started to build up during pregnancy. And then after childbirth, I think it dawned on me that parenting is physically more occupying than I thought in terms of time, in terms of mental load as well. Like by 7 p.m., I found myself almost every night on the cushion, just like, okay, my kid is asleep, but that's it for me. I'm not going back to work. It wasn't really like a big epiphany, I think.
And what changed in your entrepreneurial endeavor? Are you still in the same industry or role, as well as like the hours? How that looks like for you now compared to when you were working in a corporate?
Yeah. So entrepreneurship, you can't take it lightly, but it is true that there's more flexibility when you're own boss, right? Versus you have a manager they chase you for results, or they expect certain things to be done by a certain time. Whereas if you're doing entrepreneurship, then you're your own boss, like the results are your own, which means, of course, if you don't do anything, nothing happens. But there is a higher degree of flexibility. And so both in the first entrepreneurship journey and this current one that I transitioned to, I feel like, yes, I'm still working a lot, actually, like in terms of hours, but I shifted around so that I can always be there for my kids. And I don't think I would have been able to do it to the same degree had I still been in Amazon. Amazon being great with flexibility, at least for me it was, but still it's not the same, right? You can't just like shift the whole half day into a late night, or just deciding I'm not going to work this afternoon, but then shift that into Sunday when your kids are having their nap. So yeah, that's probably one of the things that change in terms of working styles and ways of thinking.
You know, it's occurred to me that whilst you might be actually still working the same number of hours, the big difference is the sense of purpose that you are gaining from your two jobs since Amazon. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how your two entrepreneurship stints speak to that.
Yeah. So the first one, we were trying to make sustainable choices accessible to the individual. So it's more like a grassroots B2C, and it addresses the obvious climate change, but also smaller thing. I wouldn't say smaller, but other things, fair trade, or we can choose the thing that was created not by exploiting our fellow humans somewhere else, things like that. So I guess the theme there is conscious consumption. And already I was a vegan, so there was that element there in my life anyways, but kind of running a company like that, the drive behind it was to make that normal. I didn't even hallucinate for 1 second that like this one company would make that available for everyone and change the world, or things like this. But I think the sense of like purpose played a big part in making me feel fulfilled. And in the current company, it's called Dokoni, and we're basically promoting the good. But when you look at it, we're a directory of very good restaurants recommended by chefs and gourmets. And these could be high end, but these could also be local restaurants. And the idea, it's not mentioned anywhere in the website or anything, but for me and also for the founders, and this is kind of the reason why I also decided to join them, is that they don't want their kids to grow up in a world where all they look around is like, hey, McDonald's, Burger King, not to point any fingers at any specific global chain, but basically any kind of business model that replicates the same menu everywhere in the globe and sources very mass production as well. So like promoting these boutique restaurants, these really nice local places and whatnot, it helps sort of fight this battle of globalization, which is good and bad. But I don't want the whole world to be, every country to look the same and have the same products. I think that would be a bit boring as well as not too great for the environment and things like that. So I think in that case, it's also the personal drive of thinking of like what kind of society I want to leave my kids to grow up in.
Yeah, that's a really good point that having kids just changes your perspective of time, I guess, and the legacy that you will essentially leave for them. And I can see that you've really made conscious choices to align that to what you believe you want your kids to thrive in, right? In the world that you will help build. Can you talk a little bit about how this informs your parenting?
Yeah, there's a lot, but I think so. One big theme, if you live in our house, is the vegan. We try to be minimal, the low waste, conscious, whatever you want to call it. And I won't touch on the veganism, but one interesting thing that we've decided that we've recently started with the older daughter, who is almost 3, is trying to already teach us some of our values of having minimal things and being happy with it. And by that I mean toys. So we actually have not bought like a single toy, and yet we still have a lot because people give us, grandmas, grandpas, family. Obviously, I wanted my kids to have some amount of toys. And then one day I realized that we had too much, to the point that I felt like we were having this environment that encouraged the daughter to, I don't know, have an attachment to material things. Don't know how to explain it very well, but she seemed to not want to share with her younger brother. You know, if we tried to take something away because it's dinner, she would make a big fuss out of it. And so looking into that, we realized maybe we just have things, same with adults, right? If you have too many things, you have attachments to things. So what we recently decided to do was to say, okay, girl, you tell me, do you want this? Do you want this? Do you want this? Yes or no? And then for the no, I'll say, okay, can you say goodbye to this? Yes or no? And if she says yes, then either I throw it away if it's broken, or I resell it on a secondhand platform. And if she says, I don't want it now, but I want it, like I don't want to say goodbye, then we put it in a cupboard so that at any given time, we only have a few toys out and then a cupboard full of like her reserves, and we swap them out based on her request. So sometimes she'll be like, I don't want this lion for now. Can I put it in the cupboard and can I swap something out? Okay, sure. And then we try to keep the volume of toys out in our living room at any given time to a bare minimum. So that's like one thing that I'm not sure other parents or whatnot would do. And it's definitely a parenting style that's coming from like my sense of mission or value.
This also reminds me a little bit of the whole Marie Kondo decluttering of your life, where you're like, oh, do you want this? Does this give you happiness?
Yeah, maybe. I personally don't follow the concept, but now that you say, it's actually pretty close, I guess. I just wanted to make the whole thing simple for her, and because she still doesn't understand big things like environment. So just to try to help her reduce things without getting her in a tantrum, but still somehow have her make the choice of what stays and what doesn't. What I mentioned is the way we came up with. We've always joked that parenting is about how you can outsmart you and make them and fool them into thinking that they're making all the choices.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you want to teach these values from young and you're steering them in the right direction. Okay, maybe shift a little bit to talk about the relationship you have with your husband, who was also a classmate. How did y'all work through this whole transition? Because I would imagine it would have been a significant pay cut, change in lifestyle, things like that. Did y'all have any things that y'all had to negotiate or give up?
Before I quit Amazon, I went into my first entrepreneurship. I did this huge Excel of how much money we have total in investments and whatever, how much the running expenses are, basically just this huge like Excel. And I saw that and told them, you know what? I think for a while I can sort of just go salary-less without having to like depend on you, quote unquote depend on you. And he said, okay. He said, I don't mind if you depend on me either. So like he's quite easygoing. You know him, right?
He's not most chill guys, always sleeping in class.
Luckily for me, that conversation was not very difficult. That's literally all we discussed. And I was that more anxious one. So I needed that whole spreadsheet to convince myself that I can go talk to the husband, that I've got some concrete plan. But actually he was like, I didn't need the spreadsheet. So, but I know that I'm lucky. In reality, he did pay me most of the months some kind of allowance for the things that I needed to pay for. Because he said, I prefer that than you diluting the investment. Had I had it my way, and this is just my emotional side or my saying, I really want to not depend on him, I think I would have just like sold off stock and paid for my own stuff.
Yeah. It's the harder path to create something on your own, but it sounds like you have no regrets. Or is there anything you would do differently thinking back?
Well, I would have done entrepreneurship earlier, I think, and that was before kids. Because I started on mat leave with my first kid. And then after, my time got even more limited because I now have a kid to look after. But if I could go back and change anything, it's maybe I would start doing entrepreneurship while I don't have a kid, and then do it while I have my full income from a stable company. and then transition maybe as I see that there's enough traction to pay my bills or contribute to the house. That's something I would have done differently. However, now with kids, even if I were to go back to corporate, I don't think I can do full-time corporate, have the kids, and try to do a startup like a entrepreneurship to transition to. Like there's just not enough time in the day.
It sounds like being a mom really kickstarted that effort into building something like the vegan lifestyle company and now this food recommendation company, because you know that you are making impact to actual human beings or kids who you love and care for. Maybe you can bring us to a time when you had some really tough decisions in terms of balancing mothering with work.
Also, is very active as a father. So I don't think I've had like a period of time where it was really tough to try to balance my life or work or whatever. But one thing I did learn from and struggle with, and now I sort of have a plan, is the going out in the evenings. So both my kids go to nursery from 9 to, let's say, 6 on a weekday. And then one of us picks them up and then we have dinner together and whatever. And then after dinner, until they go to sleep, you sort of half wishing they go to sleep, half wishing that they stay up longer and play with them. But post-COVID, there's a lot more networking events or these kinds of businessy events, dinners and whatnot. And one thing that was challenging for me is to leave the daughter. Like we come home together and then I spend barely any time at home and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go. And obviously she cries or she says, no, I want the mom to stay. And those moments are tough. I'm sure that's what they call mama guilt or something. I did not enjoy those moments. And for now, I try not to do 2 consecutive nights now, because what I realize is like the guilt is my thing. I can work with it, right? I don't have to feel guilty. But, I just don't want to be that parent that maybe one day my daughter will remember, oh, yeah, mama she was busy with work every evening. Because, like, if I'm not there in the evening, that's basically nursery for most of the day. Then mom is gone for the evening. And so while she's awake, she didn't see me much. So, yeah, that's something that I've changed over the past couple of months as I learn the dynamics and see what's going on.
Is there anything interesting about the Japanese culture of work, parenthood that's very different from elsewhere?
So I'll say one sad thing, one bright thing. One sad thing. Interestingly, we are probably the only country in the world that has a really good parental leave structure, in that the government supports it and both parents can take off up to a year from the date of birth of their kid, and they cannot get fired. It's just against the law to fire a parent when they're on mat leave. The interesting thing I didn't know is that actually both parents can take at the same time for a whole year if they want to. So I've heard, like, I think Sweden or somewhere in the Scandinavian area, you have to take in turn, whereas Japan up to a year, like both can go at the same time. Of course, you get a pay cut, but the government will pay a portion of what your salary is. And you can look at it different ways, but wow, the whole family can be together for at least a couple weeks, if not months, right? It's a choice that anybody can make. And yet nobody makes that choice. I think the percentage of men who take leave after a kid is born is used to be a few percent, and now it's kind of getting close to 10-ish. It's a very sad statistic. And then maybe on the brightest side, I was also surprised that healthcare is free all the way until the kids are 18.
I didn't realize that they had this year-long parental leave available for both parents, because I have Japanese friends here in Singapore, and their husbands don't even take the 2-week minimum. They actually work from home rather than go into the office, and that's equivalent. So even though the structures are there, it's almost more like the expectation they have to really work crazily, I suppose. But yeah, it's great that you guys are paving your own way and making it work in a place where cost of living is high and it's probably really stressful as well. So with that, what is something that you would love the listeners to take away from your story?
I think I have a personal mission, per se. I really want to see more women, especially in Japan, empower themselves and do what they want, and maybe go experiment whatever crazy dream or thing or project that they have, especially during the time of pregnancy and early motherhood. Because, well, if you're in Japan, there's a lot of support systems, like I just mentioned, that's fine, you get a pay cut, but it's like the one time where you're sort of allowed to explore and you have time, and also an excuse to walk away from corporate. And who knows if these things work well, whether it's a small business, like you're the only person doing something freelance, or it's a startup. If it goes well, it's amazing because you're earning an income from something that is entirely yours, and you have full flexibility of how you live, work, spend your time. So what better place to be, right? If you have kids and sometimes you want to just be there for them.
That's great. If people were interested to reach out to you, what are topics that you can speak endlessly about and would love to share your thoughts on?
Obvious ones are the sustainability, food, veganism, parenting, of course. So the women empowerment thing, I'm actually very interested to share about how to plan your finances to then have the confidence to jump into whatever experiment you want to do. And then the last thing is we're trying to raise both kids trilingual, English, Japanese, and Hebrew. So we're always very interested to talk about multilingual environment and parenting. We have no idea what we're doing, by the way. I'm always excited to connect with people who know what they're doing.
Cool. Very cool. All right. Thank you, Noriko.
Thank you for having me.
That was my classmate and now entrepreneur Noriko Shindo. What I'm taking away from that conversation is to turn the tables around, to view our limitations as potential opportunities and leveraging the societal and family support structures to reinvent this new season. Who knows what could come out of it if we did? And see you at the next episode of Make It Work.